The universe was vast, filled with countless stars, planets, and civilizations. Some were ancient and powerful, while others, like Earth, were still young and learning. For centuries, advanced alien species had explored the galaxy, solving mysteries and conquering challenges. Yet there was one problem that none of them could solve, a problem so deep that it sent waves of fear across the stars. It was a signal, a message of distress from a dying planet on the outer edge of the galaxy. But this wasn't just any normal cry for help. Every time the message was received, the response was the same: silence. The civilizations that picked up the signal saw it as a warning, a dangerous problem they couldn't afford to involve themselves in. The message came from a planet that was on the brink of destruction, its environment slowly falling apart. But what made it even more troubling was the source of the disaster. No one was sure exactly what it was. Was it a natural disaster, a deadly disease, or was it something more? No one knew for sure, but all the great civilizations of the galaxy had decided to turn away. They did not want to risk their own people or resources. For centuries, this planet's call for help echoed through space, unanswered, ignored, and forgotten by all but one species. That species was humanity. The people of Earth were new to the galactic community. They had just begun exploring space, sending their ships and probes beyond their own solar system. Their technology was still developing, and many of the older species saw them as naive and inexperienced. But the people of Earth had something that none of the other advanced civilizations had: a sense of empathy. They saw a planet in distress, and they could not simply look away. It didn't matter that they didn't know what was causing the problem, or how dangerous it might be. They couldn't ignore it. A decision was made in the highest councils of Earth's leaders. They would send a fleet to answer the call. They would go where no one else had dared to go. A group of scientists, engineers, and military personnel came together to form the crew for this extraordinary mission. The fleet was small compared to the massive armadas of the older civilizations, but it was determined. The humans would show up, no matter the risk. The journey to the planet was long, spanning years of travel through the cold and dark void of space. Yet the crew remained focused. They knew their mission: to reach the planet, discover what was happening, and, if possible, save those who still lived there. Earth had always been a place of great diversity and resourcefulness, and this mission would be no different. The crew was made up of all kinds of people: scientists, doctors, soldiers, and even a few diplomats. They all had one thing in common: they believed in the idea of helping others, no matter the cost. As they approached the planet, the fleet was met with a strange feeling. The closer they got, the more they could sense the desolation that hung over the planet. From their ships, they could see the planet's surface, a once beautiful world now scared and dying. The oceans were dark and churning, the skies filled with strange, swirling clouds. It looked like the very life of the planet was being drained away. The crew members looked out from the observation windows, their hearts heavy with worry. One of the fleet's leaders, Captain Lara Reynolds, stood in front of the crew in the command center. "We don't know what we're going to find when we get there," she said, her voice calm but serious. "This may be more dangerous than we realize, but we are going to do everything we can to help. We are humans, and when others turn away, we don't. We don't leave people behind." The crew nodded in agreement. They all knew this was their chance to prove that humanity could make a difference in the galaxy, to show that they weren't just another species among many, but one that valued compassion and teamwork. As the fleet entered the planet's atmosphere, they prepared for landing. The comms officer, a young woman named Nia, spoke into the microphone, trying to reach anyone who might still be alive on the planet below. "This is the Earth fleet," she said, her voice echoing through the silent channels. "We've received your message. We are here to help. Please respond." But there was no answer. The silence stretched on for what felt like forever. The crew of the fleet sat in tense anticipation, unsure of what to expect. They had no idea who or what they were going to find on the surface. But they had made a choice, and they would stick to it. They would help, no matter what it took. Even if the whole galaxy had turned away, humanity had chosen to answer the call. The Earth fleet landed on the dying planet in the dead of night, the eerie silence surrounding them as they stepped out onto the cracked surface. The air was thin, almost unbreathable, and the once blue skies had turned an unsettling shade of orange, as if the very atmosphere itself was fading away. Captain Lara Reynolds led the crew through the rocky terrain, her boots crunching on the brittle ground. The faint hum of their equipment was the only sound they could hear. They had come for answers, but the first thing they noticed was the absence of life. The planet had once been home to a thriving civilization, but now there were no animals, no signs of plants growing, not even the faintest sound of wind blowing. It was as though the planet had been abandoned for centuries. Yet the signal had only just been sent. The crew couldn't understand why the planet was so lifeless, so still. The mission's lead scientist, Dr. Ethan Cole, examined the planet's surface using his scanning device. His face was serious, eyes scanning the data. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. "I'm not picking up any energy signatures at all. It's as if the planet's life force has been drained completely." Lara frowned. Could it be a natural disaster? She asked, her voice filled with concern. Something like a massive volcano eruption or a climate shift. Dr. Cole shook his head. "It's not natural. I've never seen anything like this. The readings show unusual energy patterns, almost as if something is feeding off the planet itself." The team continued to move deeper into the abandoned city, passing through streets lined with crumbling buildings. The architecture was strange, unlike anything Earth had ever seen, yet familiar in its complexity. The streets were wide, designed for creatures far taller than humans. The windows were dark, and the buildings were filled with the scent of dust and decay. There was a strange feeling of loss that seemed to hang in the air, as if the city had once been full of life, and now it was nothing more than a ghost town. Lara felt a knot form in her stomach. She had hoped to find survivors, some sign that someone, anyone, was still alive. But all she saw was emptiness. Her team set up base in the central square, where a large monument to the planet's past stood. The monument was covered in strange symbols and carvings, but there was no time to study them now. They had more important matters to attend to. As they unpacked their equipment, the silence of the city began to feel unsettling. There were no sounds of creatures, no distant hum of machinery. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Dr. Cole continued his research, studying the strange energy readings that were coming from deep within the planet. "I've pinpointed something," he said, his voice urgent. "There's a massive energy source located beneath the surface, almost as if something is buried there, something powerful." Lara's eyes widened. A power source. Could it be a weapon? "No," Dr. Cole replied, shaking his head. "It's not a weapon. It's something alive." Before they could ask more questions, a sudden loud sound echoed through the city. It wasn't a rumble or a crash, but something else, a voice, faint but clear, coming from the planet itself. It was a low, vibrating hum, one that seemed to resonate deep within the bones of those who heard it. The crew froze, looking around at each other in confusion. "Did you hear that?" Maya, the comms officer, whispered, her eyes wide. "I heard it," said Lara, her voice barely audible. "What was that?" Dr. Cole looked toward the horizon, his face pale. "That wasn't natural. That sound, it's coming from deep within the planet. Whatever is down there, it's alive, and it's reaching out." The team was silent, the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They had come here to help, to solve the mystery of the dying planet. But now, they were confronted with the terrifying possibility that the planet's destruction was not the result of a natural disaster. No, something far worse was at play. The crew quickly regrouped and made the decision to investigate further. They would follow the signal's source, and uncover the truth behind the planet's downfall. But deep down, each of them knew that they were walking into a mystery that could change everything. What had once been a simple rescue mission was now a fight to uncover a truth that had been hidden for centuries. As they made their way to the coordinates Dr. Cole had discovered, the ground beneath their feet began to shake. The city seemed to tremble as the hum grew louder, echoing through the streets. Something was awakening, something that had been dormant for far too long. Lara clenched her fists. We need to find out what's causing this, and we need to do it fast. The longer we wait, the more danger we're in. The hum grew louder, and the ground beneath their feet cracked open. The crew was no longer just explorers. They were the last hope for a planet on the brink of destruction. And they had no idea what awaited them. The ground trembled beneath the crew's feet as they moved toward the coordinates Dr. Cole had pinpointed. The hum, deep and resonant, echoed louder with each step they took, making the air around them feel thick and heavy. Lara Reynolds led the way, her eyes focused on the dark horizon, where the energy source seemed to be coming from. The abandoned city around them appeared to be shifting as if it, too, was alive. The tall, strange buildings loomed like silent witnesses, their hollow windows staring out into the emptiness. As they neared the center of the city, they reached a massive structure. An ancient temple, or perhaps a palace, though it was unlike anything the humans had ever seen. It towered above them, covered in strange symbols and markings that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. The hum seemed to come from within, as if the very walls of the structure were vibrating with power. "This is it," Dr. Cole whispered, his eyes wide as he scanned the readings on his device. "The energy is coming from beneath this building. But there's something else here. Something old." Lara motioned for the team to proceed cautiously. "We need to be careful. We don't know what we're dealing with yet." The crew entered the structure, the air inside cool and damp. The walls were lined with intricate carvings that told a story the humans couldn't yet understand. As they ventured deeper into the building, they found a large chamber at its heart. In the center of the room was a platform, surrounded by tall stone pillars. The floor was cracked and uneven, and strange markings covered the walls, depicting scenes of a once thriving civilization. But what caught everyone's attention was the large glowing object in the center of the platform. It looked like a massive crystal, pulsing with an eerie light. Its surface shimmered like liquid, changing colors with each passing moment. The energy readings were off the charts. "This is it," Dr. Cole said, his voice filled with awe. "This crystal, it's connected to the planet's energy field. It's the source of the hum we've been hearing." Lara stepped closer to the crystal, feeling a strange pull. She could sense its power, but there was something else about it. It wasn't just a source of energy. It was alive in a way, a force that seemed to be both connected to the planet and to something far older. Suddenly, the air grew cold, and the room seemed to darken. A deep, rumbling sound filled the chamber, making the crew jump in surprise. The crystal began to glow brighter, and for a moment, it almost felt as if it was looking directly at them. "It's reacting to us," said Naya, the comms officer, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "But why? What does it want?" Before anyone could answer, the walls of the chamber began to shift, and a hidden passageway opened up in the back of the room. The crew stood frozen, unsure of whether they should follow or retreat. But Lara, ever the leader, made the decision. "We're not leaving until we understand what's going on here," she said firmly. "Stay alert and stay together." The passage was narrow, with walls that seemed to pulse in time with the crystal's glow. They walked for what felt like hours, the strange feeling of being watched never leaving them. Eventually, they reached a large underground cavern. At the center of the cavern was another structure, much older than the one above ground. It was made of the same stone but looked far more ancient, covered in even more complex symbols. "This is incredible," Dr. Cole murmured, his eyes wide as he approached the structure. "This isn't just a city. It's a forgotten world, A whole civilization was built around this power. Lara stepped forward and examined the carvings on the walls. "What happened to them?" she asked, her voice soft. The carvings showed scenes of beings, tall, elegant creatures with elongated features, standing around the crystal. In the images, they were worshipping it, connecting with it. But there was also something else in the pictures, something darker. The crystal had started to change, growing larger, more menacing. The beings in the carvings looked fearful, and their once thriving civilization began to fall apart. Dr. Cole studied the carvings closely. It looks like they were trying to harness the crystal's power, but something went wrong. They didn't understand it fully. The crystal fed off them, draining their life force until they were gone. The weight of his words settled over the group. Lara felt a chill in her bones. So the signal we received wasn't a cry for help. It was a warning. These people tried to use this power, and it destroyed them. Then why did it call us? Nia asked, her voice trembling. Why send out a signal if it's just going to destroy us too? Dr. Cole's eyes narrowed. It might be different this time. We have something that the other civilizations didn't, something the crystal might not expect. Lara turned to him. What do you mean? Humanity, he said quietly. We have something these beings didn't. Empathy. We might be able to understand the crystal in a way that they couldn't. The team was silent, the full weight of the situation settling in. They had discovered something ancient, something powerful, but also dangerous. The fate of this world, and possibly others, rested in their hands. They had no idea what they would find next, but they knew one thing for sure. They were not going to back down. They would face the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The cavern was vast, its walls lined with ancient stone carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air felt heavy, as if the past itself was pressing down on them. Lara Reynolds and her team stood at the edge of the underground chamber, gazing at the strange, ancient structure in front of them. They had uncovered the truth behind the signal, a planet ravaged by a powerful energy force, an energy force that had destroyed an entire civilization. But the deeper they delved into the mystery, the more questions arose. Dr. Cole was the first to speak. This is unlike anything we've ever encountered. The technology, the energy, it's all beyond anything we can comprehend, but it's also very dangerous. Lara nodded, her face serious. What's our next step? We need to figure out how to stop this before it's too late. I'm not sure if we can stop it, Dr. Cole replied, his voice tinged with worry. The crystal is not just a source of energy. It's something more. I think it's alive, or at least it was at one point. If it's feeding off the planet's life force, it could spread to other planets too. If we don't act fast, Earth could be next. The thought sent a chill down Lara's spine. They had come here to help, but now they were faced with a terrifying truth. The very force that had destroyed this world could find its way to Earth, and humanity would be powerless to stop it. Lara turned to her team. We don't have much time. We need to find a way to stop the crystal from feeding off the planet's life force. If it spreads, there's no telling how many worlds will be affected. The team nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. They quickly began setting up equipment to study the crystal and its energy source. But as they worked, the rumbling sound that had echoed through the city earlier returned, growing louder and more intense. The ground beneath their feet shook, and the walls of the cavern began to crack. We need to hurry, Nea said, her voice tight with fear. It's starting again. The crystal's power is growing. Lara glanced at the glowing object at the center of the chamber. The crystal was pulsing, its light flashing brighter with each passing moment. It felt like it was alive, like it was aware of their presence, and it seemed to be getting stronger, feeding off the energy of the planet as it had done for centuries. Dr. Cole looked at the data on his scanner. There's something else. The crystal isn't just absorbing energy from the planet. It's also drawing it from the very core of the planet. If we don't stop it soon, the planet itself could collapse. Lara's heart raced. We need to find a way to shut it down before it's too late. As the team continued their analysis, the situation grew more urgent. The crystal's power was becoming uncontrollable, and the tremors were getting stronger. It was as if the planet was on the brink of falling apart. Every second they spent here brought them closer to the planet's destruction, and the spread of the crystal's influence across the galaxy. "We have to get to the core," Dr. Cole said suddenly. "The energy is coming from deep beneath the surface. If we can shut down the crystal at its source, we might be able to stop it from spreading." Lara nodded, her decision clear. "Let's go. We don't have any time to waste." The crew moved quickly, following the path that Dr. Cole had mapped out. The ground shook more violently now, and the air was filled with a strange humming sound, like the planet itself was coming alive. They reached a narrow passageway that led deep underground, the walls growing colder the farther they descended. The passage opened up into another massive chamber, far larger than any they had seen before. In the center of the room stood a massive pillar of light, reaching up to the sky like a beam from another world. The crystal was pulsing at the base of the pillar, its energy surging like a heartbeat. The ground around it was cracked, and the walls seemed to be alive with strange symbols. "This is it," Dr. Cole said, his voice filled with awe. "This is where the energy is coming from. If we can reach the crystal, we might be able to stop it." But as they approached the glowing pillar, something changed. The light from the crystal flared brighter, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with power. A low, resonant hum filled the room, growing louder with each passing second. "It's fighting back," Naya said, her voice filled with dread. Lara looked around, realizing they had triggered something. The ground beneath their feet trembled again, and cracks began to form in the walls. The entire chamber was beginning to collapse. "We need to hurry," Lara shouted. "Get to the crystal now." The team sprinted toward the pillar of light, the hum growing louder and more intense. The crystal seemed to be alive, twisting and shifting in the air, as though it was aware of their presence. It was feeding off the planet's life force, and now it was fighting to protect itself. Lara reached the base of the crystal, her heart racing. "We have to destroy it. Now." Dr. Cole stepped forward, his hands trembling as he adjusted his scanner. "It's not just energy. It's consciousness. The crystal isn't a machine. It's a living entity, one that's feeding off the planet's life force. If we destroy it, we might destroy the planet too." Lara's mind raced. They were facing a choice no one had ever prepared them for. How could they save a planet if its very lifeblood was tied to the crystal? But they had to act fast, or the planet, and perhaps many others, would be lost forever. The crystal pulsed with an eerie light, casting strange shadows across the walls of the cavern. Lara Reynolds could feel the power of the energy vibrating in the air around her. She stood frozen, heart pounding, as the glowing pillar seemed to reach out toward her, pulling her in. The hum of the crystal echoed in her chest, like the beat of a drum, louder and more insistent. Time was running out. "We have to act quickly," Dr. Cole said, his voice tense as he studied his scanner. "The crystal is feeding off the planet's core. If we don't stop it, the entire planet could collapse. And if we destroy it, there's no telling what could happen to the planet." Lara's mind raced. They had come here to save a civilization, to answer a distress call, but now they were faced with an impossible choice. Destroy the crystal and risk the destruction of the planet, or find a way to stop it from feeding without causing harm. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. "Is there any way to stop it without destroying the planet?" Lara asked, turning to Dr. Cole. "I'm not sure," he replied, his face grim. "The crystal isn't just a power source. It's a living entity, and it's been feeding off the planet for so long that it's now part of the very fabric of this world. We could try to sever the connection, but it might be too late. The planet's energy is tied to the crystals, and if we try to separate them, it could tear the planet apart." Lara glanced at her team, each of them tense and worried. Naya, the comms officer, gripped her equipment, her eyes scanning the chamber as if waiting for something to happen. The rest of the crew looked just as uncertain. They had no clear answers, and the longer they waited, the more the crystal seemed to grow stronger. Lara took a deep breath, trying to steady her thoughts. The choices ahead of them were daunting, but they couldn't afford to wait much longer. The ground was shaking beneath their feet, and the walls of the cavern were starting to crack. It was as if the planet itself was beginning to collapse, reacting to the crystal's increasing power. "Lara, what if we tried to communicate with it?" Nia suggested, her voice soft but filled with hope. "Maybe it's not all bad. Maybe the crystal's just lost. If we can understand it, maybe we can find a way to stop it from feeding without destroying the planet." The idea was a long shot, but Lara couldn't shake the thought. The crystal was a living entity, as Dr. Cole had said, and it might not be inherently evil. It could have been trying to communicate all this time, just waiting for someone who could understand. The thought gave Lara a glimmer of hope. Perhaps the crystal wasn't the true enemy. Perhaps it was just another lost being, searching for a way to survive. "We don't have much time," Lara said, her voice steady. "But if there's even a chance that we can stop this without destroying the planet, then it's worth trying." Dr. Cole nodded reluctantly. "It's risky. If we misstep, we could trigger something much worse." Lara turned to the rest of the team. "We'll give it a try, but we stay together, and we stay focused. No matter what happens, we don't leave anyone behind." The crew moved closer to the glowing crystal. The hum of its energy was deafening now, like the roar of a storm, but they couldn't turn back. They had to try. The moment they reached the base of the crystal, the air grew thick with energy, almost suffocating them. It was as if the very atmosphere was alive, swirling around them, pressing down on their bodies. Dr. Cole raised his hands, carefully adjusting the instruments he had brought with him. "If we can establish a connection, it might be able to hear us. But we'll need to synchronize our efforts. Everyone, focus." Lara nodded and closed her eyes, letting herself attune to the vibrations of the crystal. She could feel its pulse, slow and steady at first, then gradually increasing in strength. It was as if the crystal was reaching out to them, trying to communicate in its own way. The energy around them shifted, and Lara suddenly had the strangest sensation, like she was standing in two places at once. She felt the life of the planet beneath her feet, the heartbeat of the world itself, and at the same time, she could feel the crystal's energy surging within her. "It's alive," Naya whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "It's thinking. It's aware." Lara's heart raced. She focused on the crystal's energy, trying to reach out to it, to understand it. She felt a surge of energy flow through her, and in that moment, she realized that the crystal wasn't just feeding off the planet. It was connected to the planet's very life force, tied to it in a way that was almost symbiotic. If it was cut off from the planet, the entire world would die with it. But if they could find a way to balance the energy, to sever the crystal's draining connection without destroying it, they might just be able to save the planet. But that would mean a delicate touch, something none of them were sure they could accomplish. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and a deep rumbling filled the chamber. The crystal's light flared brighter, and the energy began to pulse uncontrollably. It was resisting them, fighting back against their attempts to communicate. Lara's heart pounded in her chest. "We have to move fast. If we don't find a solution now, it will be too late." The ground shook once more, harder than before. Lara Reynolds gripped the edge of the stone platform as the crystal's energy surged around her. The air was thick with power, vibrating as though the very fabric of reality was being stretched. Each pulse of the crystal seemed to rattle her bones, and she could feel the tension building, the pressure mounting. Time was running out. She had no idea how long they had left before the planet's core collapsed, or the crystal's energy spread uncontrollably. "We have to stop it," Dr. Cole shouted over the roaring hum of the crystal. His face was pale, sweat pouring down his forehead. He was desperately adjusting the readings on his device, trying to make sense of the increasing energy flow. If we don't shut it down now, the planet will. I know, Lara interrupted, her voice tight with urgency. She looked around at the rest of the team. Their faces reflected the same worry she felt, but there was no time for fear now. They had come so far, and they couldn't give up. Not now. The hum of the crystal was deafening, filling their ears and pressing on their minds. Lara could feel it inside her chest, as though the crystal itself was calling to her, urging her to understand. Her hand instinctively reached out toward the glowing surface, almost as if the crystal were inviting her to make the connection it so desperately needed. Lara, wait, Mia cried out, her voice filled with fear, but it was too late. Lara's hand brushed against the crystal, and in that moment, everything changed. Her vision exploded with light. For a brief second, she felt weightless, as though she was floating in space. Then, images flooded her mind. Flashbacks of the planet's history, the rise and fall of the ancient civilization, and the crystal itself. It was as if the crystal had opened a door to its past. She saw the beings that had once inhabited this world, their tall and elegant forms, their connection to the crystal, and their attempt to harness its power. But something had gone terribly wrong. Lara saw the shift, the moment when the beings' greed and desperation to control the crystal's energy had led to their downfall. The crystal, once a source of life and prosperity, had begun to feed off them, draining their energy, their very essence. The civilization had fallen, and the planet had been left to decay. Yet the crystal remained, still pulsing, still alive, still seeking more. Suddenly, a voice, deep, ancient, and filled with sadness, echoed in her mind. It was the crystal, speaking to her. "I did not choose this path," the voice said. "I was meant to protect them, to help them. But they misunderstood. They tried to control me, to make me something I was not. And now I am lost, alone, hungry." Lara gasped, pulling her hand back as the vision faded. She stumbled back, her mind reeling from what she had just experienced. The crystal wasn't evil. It wasn't trying to destroy the planet out of malice. It was trying to survive. But its power had been corrupted, twisted by the beings who had once tried to use it. Dr. Cole rushed to her side, his face filled with concern. "Lara, are you okay?" She nodded slowly, still trying to process what she had seen. The crystal, it's not evil. It's not trying to destroy the world. It's been alone for so long. It's just trying to survive. The team gathered around her, waiting for her to explain. Nea spoke up first, her voice full of confusion. "What do you mean?" "The crystal's been feeding off the planet for centuries. It's what's causing the planet's collapse." "I know," Lara said, her voice steady. "But it wasn't always like this. The crystal was meant to help the people who lived here. It was supposed to be a source of life, not death. But when they tried to control it, when they tried to use it for power, the crystal became something else. It became hungry. It's been feeding off the planet ever since, trying to fill the emptiness left by its creators." "So what do we do now?" Nea asked, her voice trembling. Lara looked at the crystal again. It pulsed with energy, but there was something different about it now. It wasn't angry or hostile. It was tired, lonely. She knew what she had to do. "We have to help it," Lara said firmly. "We have to give it what it needs. Not control, not power, but understanding. We need to help it reconnect with the planet. If we can do that, we can stop the planet from collapsing." "But how?" Dr. Cole asked, his brow furrowed. "We don't even know where to start. It's been feeding off the planet for so long. It might be too late." Lara turned to face him. "We can't give up. We can't let fear control us. The crystal is connected to the life force of this world. If we can find a way to balance the energy, to help it reconnect with the planet's core, it will stop feeding off the life force. It's our only chance." The team exchanged uncertain glances. They were facing an unimaginable task, one that no one had ever prepared them for. But Lara was certain of one thing: they had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. "We have to work together," Lara said. "We've seen what happens when things are forced out of balance, but we also know that humanity has a unique gift. We have the ability to understand, to empathize. If we can show the crystal that it doesn't need to drain the planet to survive, maybe, just maybe, we can save both." With renewed determination, the crew set to work. They gathered their equipment, ready to attempt what seemed impossible. The fate of the planet, and of their own world, rested on their shoulders. The cavern was quiet now, the intense hum of the crystal replaced by an eerie stillness. Lara Reynolds stood before the glowing pillar of light, her heart pounding in her chest. The crystal, once a source of unrelenting energy, now seemed calm, as if it was waiting, listening. The weight of their mission pressed heavily on her, but she knew they had no choice. The fate of an entire world rested in their hands. "We've come this far," Dr. Cole said, his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed the uncertainty that lingered in his mind. "But we still don't know if this will work. The crystal has been feeding for so long. Can we really help it?" Lara glanced at him, her gaze firm. "We have to try. We can't give up now. We've seen what this planet could be, what it was meant to be. If we give the crystal the chance to reconnect with the planet, we can stop it from draining the life force. We just need to believe it's possible." The rest of the team stood in a circle around the crystal, their faces filled with a mix of fear and determination. Naya adjusted her equipment, her fingers trembling slightly. She had seen the destruction caused by the crystal's unchecked power, but she trusted Lara. They had no other option. "Lara, we're ready," Naya said softly, her voice filled with resolve. Lara nodded, taking a deep breath. They had set up their equipment in a delicate arrangement, designed to balance the crystal's energy with the planet's core. Every step had to be perfect. One mistake, and the entire planet could be lost. The pressure was overwhelming, but she pushed it aside. They had no time for doubt. "We connect with the crystal's energy now," Lara instructed. "We need to show it that it doesn't have to drain the planet to survive. We need to help it find balance." Dr. Cole nodded, stepping forward with his scanner. "I'm ready. I'll monitor the energy fluctuations. If the balance shifts, we'll need to adjust immediately." Lara placed her hand on the crystal once more. This time, she didn't feel fear or hesitation. She felt a deep, almost gentle pulse from the crystal, a soft vibration that seemed to respond to her touch. She closed her eyes and focused, reaching out with her mind, willing herself to connect with the crystal's ancient consciousness. The moment she did, a wave of emotion washed over her, a mix of sadness, loneliness, and longing. The crystal had been alone for so long, trapped in a cycle of feeding and growth, with no way to break free. It had lost its purpose, its connection to the world it was meant to protect. But it wasn't too late. Lara could feel its need for balance, for understanding. "I know you," Lara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know you didn't choose this path. You can stop. You don't have to keep draining this planet. We can help you reconnect with the world around you." The energy in the cavern shifted. The crystal's light dimmed slightly, as if listening, considering her words. Lara could feel the shift in the air, the change in the pulse. It was working. The connection between the crystal and the planet's core was slowly, gently, starting to realign. "It's responding," Naya said, her eyes wide with hope. "It's slowing down. The energy's stabilizing." Lara smiled, but there was no time to relax. The crystal's power was still immense, and they had to be careful. They needed to guide it through the final steps of reconnection. "We need to focus," Lara said, her voice steady. "The crystal is finding its balance, but we need to help it adjust slowly. If we rush it, the planet might not survive the shift." Dr. Cole watched the readings carefully, his brow furrowed. "The energy is stabilizing, but it's still fluctuating. We need to make sure the planet's core isn't overtaxed. If we overload it, the planet could collapse from within. Lara nodded, her hand still resting on the crystal. The vibration was softer now, more in harmony with the natural flow of the planet. It was working, but they had to be patient. "We need to guide the energy," Lara said. "I'll continue connecting with the crystal. The rest of you, keep monitoring the planet's core. If anything changes, let me know immediately." The team worked in synchronized silence. Nia and Dr. Cole kept a close watch on their equipment, making minute adjustments as the energy continued to stabilize. The air around them seemed to pulse gently, like the heartbeat of a living world. Lara focused entirely on the crystal, guiding its energy as it gradually reconnected with the planet's life force. Minutes passed, and slowly, the shaking stopped. The vibrations that had once threatened to tear the planet apart began to subside. The glow from the crystal softened to a gentle light, and the pulse slowed to a calm rhythm, matching the rhythm of the planet itself. Lara took a deep breath, feeling the connection between the crystal and the planet now firmly in place. The crystal no longer seemed hungry. It was at peace. "We did it," Naya said softly, her voice filled with awe. Lara stepped back, her hand falling from the crystal. The cavern was silent now, the energy no longer threatening but peaceful. The team exchanged relieved looks. They had succeeded. But there was still one question that hung in the air. "Is it over?" Lara asked, her voice quiet. "Have we truly saved this world?" Dr. Cole looked at the readings on his scanner. "It's done. The energy levels are stable. The planet is safe." Lara smiled, a weight lifting from her chest. They had done it. They had saved this world from certain destruction, not through violence or force, but through understanding, empathy, and a willingness to listen. And as they made their way back to the surface, Lara felt a new sense of purpose. They had not only saved a planet, but they had also found a way to help the universe heal. Humanity had made its mark, not by conquering, but by connecting. And in that connection, they had found a future brighter than they could have ever imagined.